good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining me once again on In the Bottle. I'm your host, Angelica Nora, and it's my aim to educate you on wines from all over the world, leave you with a tiny bit of trivia and potentially a bit tipsy as well. But before we start, let me please thank the team here at Studio 24/7 who just week after week just show up, they make this happen, and I could not be more grateful. And guys, I cannot recommend them enough for your virtual events, especially looking into the future. I couldn't ask for a better team. And secondly, please remember this is interactive. Please post your questions, your comments. We want to know what you think about what's going on, what we're talking about. Sometimes when you've been in the wine game for as long as we have, you kind of forget which wine knowledge is common versus what is learnt through years of doing this. So please, if something doesn't make sense, let us know. We'll be in the comments very soon. Today, it's going to shock a lot of people who know me to hear we're heading over the ditch to our good friends in New Zealand. It took me 10 years in this importing business to find a New Zealand winery that I felt I could collaborate with and really promote. And I never thought I'd actually end up working with a company in the Marlborough. Yes, Sauvignon Blanc. However, I am so proud to say we import the wonderful wines of Kuno and Tohu. And today we're going to be joined, I should say, by Bruce and Anna, the winemakers of these incredible wines. And hopefully by the end of this, I'm sure you're going to fall in love with this brand just as much as I have. Why Kuno? It's a Maori-owned winery in New Zealand's Marlborough region, and their key pillars are sustainability, both of culture and of land, and they have this thing about warm, authentic connections with family. So to me, it's both romantic and so good for future sustainability of the region. So, without further ado, put your virtual hands together for Bruce and Anna from Tohu Wines. Hey guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
No worries, our pleasure.
Have we already started getting on it yet, or are we still a bit early over in New Zealand? Hey, that's what I want to see.
Friday over here.
I love it. Guys, I'm really excited. I think what I really want to get out of today is I want the people here that are watching to really get an appreciation for the Awatare Valley, where you both work in, get a little bit of understanding around winemaking and how it happens, why it happens, all that kind of thing. So yeah, let's have some fun.
Cool.
I'm excited.
Sounds great.
But before we do start, can you just a little bit for the people at home, what was the inspiration behind becoming a winemaker for the two of you?
Ooh, who wants to go first?
You go first.
For me, it was very late in life, to be honest. I was in my sort of early 30s before I started even sort of appreciating wine, maybe, and I just sort of, at the time, was very naive, thought it sort of looked like a glamorous sort of career that I could travel all around the world with and all that sort of stuff, and probably a bit very naive and didn't quite realise all the sort of hard work out in the cellar and cold and wet and all the sort of the physical side of it. And then just sort of getting, I think, for me, I went back to university and I did 1 year when I was 31 just to see if I would like it. And sort of fell in love with it, really. It's pretty hard to imagine doing anything else now.
Yeah.
I don't know. How about you?
It's quite freaky how similar our stories are. I was actually working as a graphic designer in Melbourne. And I don't know, I'd been doing it for a while and I loved it, but maybe was looking for a change. And I had some friends, actually New Zealanders, that were working in wineries in Northern Victoria. And I kind of, it was like this realization. It's like, oh my God, people make wine for a living. How did I not know this? And then when I found out, I just had to do it myself to find out. So I moved, left Melbourne, moved to Blenheim in New Zealand, and I've never really looked back. I've just fallen in love with it, and yeah.
Was Tohu the first company you worked with, or have you been around
I went back, I studied again, but unlike Bruce, I did a 3-year degree, so another degree, and then I started at the bottom, started as a cellar hand, dragging hoses around, and just worked my way up. So
love it.
So I was 8 years. Yeah.
8 years.
I started. Yeah.
Do you feel inspired to travel around the world and do a vintage somewhere else?
Oh, yeah, I've actually been lucky while I've been learning. I've been able to do a few vintages around the world. But I guess, I was quite determined, having it been my second career, to kind of get stuck in and to become a winemaker fairly quickly. Yeah.
Awesome.
I've done a lot of traveling beforehand. So, but not now I'd like to go and travel, maybe not so much work in different wineries around the world, but definitely go and taste around the world would be awesome. Of course, can't go anywhere at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't go anywhere right now. But Bruce, have you worked around the world as a winemaker as well?
Yeah, I think all of us probably, like when we're starting out, and it's something that you almost have to be sort of single with a family and all that sort of no mortgage and all that sort of carry on. I guess when I was 30, 31, 32 back at university, and then straight after that headed overseas. Well, actually headed not very far overseas to Australia. So lived in Margaret River for 4 years, I think it was, 3 vintages. And then, so you'd sort of do what so many New Zealanders and Aussies do, which is a Northern Hemisphere vintage and a Southern Hemisphere vintage. So I'd go up and I worked in Spain, in Sicily, in California, and in Eastern Europe, out in Moldova as well, 1 year.
Oh, wow.
So sort of do that and then come back to Margaret River or come back to Marlborough and sort of chop and change between it, just while you're sort of learning your ropes, I suppose.
I love it.
Getting your head around different ways everyone can do everything before you sort of settle down into. For me, it was really good timing because the industry in Marlborough was just starting to take off when I moved back here for a job in 2006, and it was just job opportunities galore, and the industry was just booming. Everyone was planting and expanding, and it was like really good timing. So I think similar to you, right?
Yeah.
At the same time. So lots of Kiwis that probably never imagined they would live in Blenheim ended up living in the mid 2000s.
Well done. I love it. What unique skills, based on that, with the history that you guys both have had, what unique skills do you think you both bring to this winemaking process? Like, to have a chief winemaker and an assistant winemaker, what are these unique skills do you feel that you both bring?
I don't know. I had a Bachelor of Arts in History before I started winemaking. I think staying calm is the biggest skill. It's just sort of rolling with the punches and trying to learn from your mistakes, maybe learn from that experience and stuff. So we were quite lucky in a way, because we started out. I mean, both of us, when we took over this winery in 2012, when Anna came on board, it was a lot smaller. So it's sort of grown under both of us. So we've sort of had that chance to grow with it as well, I guess. And you sort of take on more staff every year, and the staff is probably one of the biggest sort of challenges out there, really. Like in any business, I suppose, as you head more into that sort of management side of it. And I think it's just experience in winemaking as well. It's like knowing what's happening out in the vineyard and how that's going to impact on your wines as you head into those years. Like, it's pretty hard to imagine sort of doing a good job right from the start. It's like
there's a lot of intuition in it, isn't it? Like, winemaking is definitely a lot of intuition. Like how, in terms of the patience that you need, how long things need to take, when you should start ferment, when they should stop. I think a lot of intuition comes into it, which is something I guess you guys don't think about too much. Yeah,
and it's experience and building on things like taste memory, and that experience just kind of builds and builds and builds. So trusting yourself that that this is the right decision, based on that experience and intuition. So it's where that kind of art and science comes into play.
I think not listening to other people too much as well, because at the end of the day, honestly, you have to make a decision, and everybody's got a different opinion, especially when it comes to wine.
Absolutely. The most subjective thing in the world. It drives me nuts sometimes.
And figure it out, and you worry about the rest of it later.
Awesome. So tell me, before we actually talk about Kunu and Tohu as a brand, what is so special, or what is so significant, I guess, with the Awatare Valley? Can you just explain to people at home, what is so significant about this region?
Well, the Awatare Valley is southern Marlborough. It has quite a different climate than the rest of Marlborough. It's a lot cooler. It really is kind of on the margins of where grapes can be grown. And I always believe that it's those marginal areas that in really good years, make the most outstanding wines. And our vineyard is much higher, more inland than a lot of Marlborough as well. So I think those geographical and climatical conditions really make it quite unique.
Yeah, for sure. I think I used to get just sort of lost in Marlborough as a whole region back in, sort of 10, 15 years ago. It was all just sort of a blanket Marlborough sort of appellation across it. But now, as we get a bit more mature and everyone's explored all these little side valleys, and really the Awatare is a big valley, there's more sort of appreciation, I suppose, for the sort of idiosyncrasies of the different sort of valleys. And like the main valley in Marlborough is very much flat valley floor, sort of at sea level, not too far from the ocean, sort of quite rich soils and all that sort of stuff. Whereas the Awatare is, you can see behind my shoulder,
Nice.
the mountain which dominates the place, and our vineyard is, it's right up there, quite close to my house actually. I'm quite biased about the Awatare. I actually live out here, and I sort of don't live very far from that mountain, which is looks nice in pictures, but in the middle of July is like really cold.
I didn't realize that. So wow, I've learned something. I didn't realize it was like the marginal region, like area of the Marlborough. That's awesome. Great. That's great. Good to know. This is the kind of things I'm going to use next time I'm speaking to people. I love it. And why Kuno and Tohu? Like, what is so special about this company?
I don't know. Is it because I worked here?
I think you really nailed it in your introduction. Like just the uniqueness, the New Zealand owned, the whānau family approach, and the sustainability, care for the land.
Yeah. It's such a unique story, like in a world full of sort of globalization and sort of big corporate sort of international companies sort of dominating Marlborough, and the world of wine really, like we are a polar sort of opposite of that, I suppose. So a big attraction for me was this vineyard behind me, because I was aware of Tohu when I worked for a previous company, and some of the best fruit that I saw was coming from vineyards that we sourced from very close to this vineyard. So I was sort of aware what Tohu was doing, but it didn't seem like Tohu had really sort of made the most of its sort of single vineyard and its Awatare story. It was getting a bit lost in all the other wines that we were making back in the day as well. So I think since not really to do with me, but since I've worked for the company, and especially since we've bought and sort of developed this winery out in the Awatare as well, we've become more and more sort of focused on this valley, as I think it's something that's sort of a real premium, different aspect to Marlborough. And you can see it in our wines. I think they have a different sort of minerality and a different sort of texture and weight running through them. They're not sort of so typical Marlborough. Yeah, I think that's very attractive as a winemaker.
Well, that was a bloody beautiful segue, Bruce, because I think it's the time that we start trying some wines. We are going to have a heavy focus on the whites today, but anyone that watches this often will know that I'm a sucker for a bubbles. So we had to bring along the Rewa Sparkling to start, and I'm sure you guys have that over there too, right? So we're going to drink together, shall we? So tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind this Rewa brand, or this Rewa range that you guys did.
So we first brought this one out in 2009. Was our first vintage of this, and it was it's a single vineyard. It's actually from a grower of ours back in the other valley, so this doesn't come out of the Awatare.
After all that on the Awatare.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's from a single clone of sort of Chardonnay over there, which seemed to lend itself more to sparkling production, being sort of big berries and all that sort of thing, and earlier ripening, I suppose, rather than for making table wine out of, or for making good sort of barrel fermented Chardonnay, which we both enjoy as well. So back in 2009, we made a very small volume of this. In 2010, we sort of got cold feet, or my CEO at the time got cold feet, and we didn't make one in 2010. And then in 2011, we myself and the vineyard manager decided to ignore the CEO, and we sort of started making it in 2011, because obviously with the sparkling, it's like a long process.
No money's made in bubbles, let's face it.
This wine first hit the market in 2012 or something, 2013. So it's such a long way out, So it's always been a long project. We made a tiny amount of it. It sold really well and got quite successful. We won gold medals and trophies and bits and bobs with it. So it's just sort of spiraled from there, really. Yeah. So Anna sort of looks after these days too.
Yeah. Oh, Anna, you look after the Rewa?
Yeah.
Nice. Go, girl. That's what I'm talking about. So it's a Blanc de Blanc, so 100% Chardonnay. How long does this lay down for? Because it is method traditional, for those that know.
Around about between 24 and 26 months on lees in the bottle. Yeah.
Well, shall we talk about it? Seeing as you look after this, how about you talk the audience through this, Anna? What are we expecting from this wine?
So the Tohu Rewa is actually, I just want to mention Methode Marlborough. We're part of the Methode Marlborough group, which is, it's kind of like a quality mark. It's a group of like-minded wineries who are producing Methode in quite traditional method. So it's either, so the grapes need to be Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris. It has to have at least 24 months in bottle, bottle fermented, Marlborough grapes. Yeah, so we're part of that. We're really kind of quite proud to be part of that family of wines as well.
One of maybe 10 producers.
Yeah, 10 producers.
So this is something you guys just did by yourself. It's not a government initiative. It's not a regional initiative. It's just, wow. So it's just like a group of 10 people who are coming together to go, we are going to enhance the sparklings, I guess, of this region. That is cool.
I think set some ground rules, which sort of made us all adhere to, like, they're actually stricter rules than what apply to champagne production, sort of ironically.
Wow.
So I think it was, to be fair, it was probably a bit of a reaction to some of the sparkling Sauvignon Blancs which were coming out. So there was people that were sort of serious about making, proper Methode in the champagne style, and people that were making, sparkling, wines that weren't so serious, I guess. So it was a way to sort of try and distinguish ourselves from that and sort of set some ground rules which we've had to adhere to. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a nice initiative.
It smells amazing. Get all that beautiful creaminess that's coming through, all that you can smell that leesiness coming through, all that beautiful cheese. But you still get that gorgeous hint of apple as well coming through on the nose, which I love. So well done. Let's have a little taste of this for those that are playing at home. I know I should spit, but I just cannot do that. Has such beautiful acidity. You've got all that creaminess coming through, but all that beautiful fruit, like you've still got all that lovely crisp apple that pops through. So it just shows the quality of this Chardonnay that you guys are using. So well done on this sparkling. I literally import this just for myself because I don't think, because at the same kind of price point, you are looking at champagne for us here. So I am trying to push people towards something a little bit different. So this is why I wanted to really highlight this today. So well done. Can't wait to taste other vintages. And the rosé apparently is very, very good.
Yeah, no, the rosé is great. We made that for our 20th anniversary. So it's pure Pinot Noir. Piping rosé.
Well, I can't wait to try that one. That's going to be awesome. All right, let's move on to our first white. Sorry, say it again.
I'm biased, of course.
Of course, if you make it, you should be. Yes. Okay, so now we're going to do the Wreath Sling. So I believe you guys have a different Wreath Sling to me over there, but we're going to look at this 2017 to start because for those playing at home, the Tohu range is changing. So this went from this label to now you guys will confirm for me it's the Whenua Awa range. So it's a different labeling. Is that correct? Yeah. But we're going to play with this one. I love this Riesling, and I think off-dry Riesling really is underrated. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that. But in terms of, can you guys speak through the reason behind why choosing, like why'd you choose, one, how does Riesling grow in the region? How does it go? And then secondly, why choose an off-dry style?
I think for us, like in the New Zealand setting as well, we would see this as almost a dry Riesling. Like we realise it's not sort of Clear Valley, Eden Valley, but so much of the Riesling produced in New Zealand and Waipara and Marlborough, etc., has always had like quite a lot of residual sugar in it, and it's definitely, I think you'll see across all of our wines, none of them have got lots of residual sugar. We make everything pretty much dry because that's sort of what we like drinking ourselves, which is what you can do when you're the winemakers. You just make wines.
But just step back one second, because you said it's quite cold there. So as someone who's like studied wine, I go, okay, because it's cold, you normally have like hold a lot of acid, and I don't imagine the grapes would get as full or rich or like hold as much sugar. So how do you guys end up with so many? This might be a very dumb question, but how do you end up with so many off-dry styles of wine?
I guess if you're looking at those off-dry styles of Riesling, they would be sort of lower alcohol. So people are still getting up to, what we would call bricks. I know you got it in Australia, it's in Beaumays, but for us, you're still getting up to sort of a potential alcohol of 13%. So if people are fermenting them through to sort of 11.5, 12, that still leaves you with a fair whack of sugar in the wine. whereas we would tend to try and pick things a little bit earlier and ferment them almost dry. I can't remember exactly what the sugar level is in this in 2017, but it's pretty down there. I think it's under 7 grams anyway. So which tastes, to me it comes through as pretty dry, just because it does have that so much acidity. It's really growing in the.
But I guess for me, I think where I say it's like off dry, it's the fruit sweetness probably. Like it's so much fruit sweetness, and it's so delicious. Like just on the nose, it just explodes. And is Riesling quite a big thing in the region?
Oh, it'd be nice if it was, but you'd have to say not.
I think it's definitely a thing that winemakers love to make, but Sav always tends to be the more popular.
But I noticed you guys really play. Like you guys play with Albarino, you're playing with Riesling, you're playing with all these different things. So yeah, it's obviously there's something about that valley that's allowing you to do that.
Yeah. I guess they're always within that same spectrum of sort of cooler climate varietals and stuff. We're not playing with Shiraz and Cabernet Sauvignons, I guess.
Hey, Cab cool. Cab Sav's cool. Like I dare you to try it. But this wine,
like it from
no,
it's a little bit too cool.
Just talking through this wine, like on the nose. I love that because it's already starting to get turn that little bit more of that petrochemical. It's starting to get that petrochemical Riesling thing coming on, but it's still got all that beautiful cream, there's beautiful creaminess coming through. You've got all that lemon zest and stuff as well. So it's still got all this beautiful primary fruit, but you can really start to see the development of this wine. So I think they think to keep the Clare Valleys and the Eden Valleys, all these dry styles for such a long time. Something like this can age. You can really taste how it's starting to develop, which excites me so much. So I've kind of kept a lot of this Riesling back just for myself as well. Yeah, by the way, I only import your wine for myself. But yeah, there's something really, I don't know, food-worthy / like interesting and intriguing about this. Is there a certain process that this goes through that's different to what people would expect, or is it just a standard like fermented in a tank kind of thing?
No, I guess we handle it. It's all handled completely oxidatively, so there's no preservatives, which is sulfur or carbon dioxide used at juice stage as well. So I think that is probably a bit of a difference with it, possibly to how they would handle Riesling in the Clare and Eden. I'm not too sure, but so we essentially will use it's hand picked, whole bunch pressed, and cool fermented in tank, but there's no protection of the juice, if you like. So I always sort of think I had an Aussie CEO back in the day, like 10, 12 years ago, who was a little bit horrified at my treatment of Riesling juice, because it literally, the juice will go brown. It looks like a cup of cold tea.
Really?
So it really looks like you've really screwed it up, essentially. You're used to sort of having nice bright green looking juice and bright green wines, but essentially we sort of oxidize that juice at an early stage, and it sort of delays the development as well. Like I can see those sort of petrochemical kerosene characters coming through in that wine now, but they won't really accelerate so much like you do when you're really being very protective with your juice. So it's quite an old-fashioned way. Well, it's an old world way of making Riesling. I think it's not very protective. Lots of oxygen. You sort of deal with your phenolics and get rid of some of those characters that will age quite early on. So yeah, it's quite confronting.
I think it's interesting because oxidative. Yeah, sorry. Oxidative is such a trend right now, I think, with this, I guess, natural wine movement that's happening. But what I like to show with stuff like this is that you can have this oxidative wine style, but still make a clean wine. It doesn't need to. So this is, I always say, the difference is a lot of people are trying these natural wines that are made by people who should be making beer. You know what I mean? This, if you really want to understand what a wine can do, it can be naturally done, like oxidatively done or whatever, and it's still clean. We don't have to be smelling a barnyard. So well done. Love it. Well, this is one of my favorite wines. Absolutely, like for those playing, even the acidity, like when people taste this for themselves, the acidity just comes through for ages. Like I think you were talking, and for like 30 to 45 seconds, my mouth was still watering. Like the finish is just divine. The acidity is lovely. The fruit weight is beautiful. You're getting all those aged characters, but as you said, like it's I think that's just adding. It just adds to the complexity of it. It doesn't mean it's going to go bad anytime soon. Highly recommend people put this away for a couple more years and see how it looks. But show me the label for the new. Like, what's the new bottle that we're getting? What's that look like?
The new ones are under our Pinot series wines. So these are sort of single vineyard, single block wines from from the same vineyard. Essentially, they are basically the same wine, but this is it's sort of moving up a little bit of a tier within our sort of range of wines, I suppose. So these are new series of wines that we brought out, just over a year ago, actually. Yeah, so they're sort of capturing some of it.
Well, that's on its way. That's on its way for us, which is exciting because, the thing is, we're at this point where, for those playing at home, I had a container that was meant to arrive this week, but thank you, the world as it looks right now, nothing is turning up when it should. So, yay. Okay, so we were going to do the Tohu Pinot Gris, but Angelica forgot it. So we're going to do the Kunnel Pinot Gris for those at home. So what's the difference for those for those people? Because I kind of know the difference, but for those that don't know, what's the difference between the Kunnel range and the Tohu range for you guys?
The Tohu tends to be Awatare single vineyards, whereas Kunnel is probably more Marlborough generic. We don't try and keep it so much Awatare, so it's more classic Marlborough than the Awatare. So, yeah. And
this is the Pinot Gris from Nelson. Can you tell us a little bit, like, do you guys own the vineyards there, or? I know, what's that?
Halfway through that conversation.
Well, Pinot Sauv Blanc makes sense, but we are going to try the Pinot Gris. So tell me about Nelson.
Yeah, I'll pass that one over to Bruce.
Okay.
I think the difference in the range, or sort of the philosophy behind them, and the confusion is probably coming from Anna, because we've been changing and sort of trying to land on where exactly we are going with these things. But I guess with the Kunnel, the intention with them is that they are sort of like picking out the bigger regions within New Zealand, right? So our Kunnel Sauvignon that we do is all of Marlborough. The Kunnel Pinot Gris is from Nelson. It's actually from our vineyard in Nelson. The Kunnel Rosé is from Nelson. We do a Chardonnay from Nelson. But as we sort of move up the tiers into the Tohu Pinot Gris is from Awatare Valley, the same as our Sauvignon Blanc is. So we're sort of narrowing the focus as we sort of go up through our tiers. And then when we get into the Whenua wines, like the Wreath Sling that I just showed you, that's from a single vineyard within the valley as well. So it's sort of like, with Kunnel, we start out with a much wider geographical area. With the Tohu, with those white label wines, we're sort of narrowing into sort of recognised sort of sub-regions, I guess, and that's sort of across other parts of Nelson and Marlborough and Gisborne and Hawke's Bay within New Zealand as well. And then it sort of narrows the focus down even more as it goes up. So, yeah. So
I think that's really important for the region too, because it's kind of like in Australia, Tasmania gets dumped into Tasmania, right? It's like if things get dumped into Marlborough, people have this perception of what Marlborough is. But if you can start highlighting the different regions within that region and show how different it can be, that's how we actually educate the consumers on drinking better wines. Like, you don't have to drink mass production wine. We can drink better wines from the same region and really see what the region can do. So yeah, I see what you guys are doing there. I love it. That's awesome. That's very cool. Let's have a look at this wine. So I love to call this like my cheap and cheerful back porch kind of wine. It has that beautiful aromatics. Like, it's just like this, it just pops full of like potpourri and like, why do you feel that New Zealand focuses so much on that Pinot Gris style compared to the Pinot Grigio style, particularly because it's so cold? Like, you think that they want that crisp, dry, herbaceous style of wine. Why do you think Kiwis like to move towards the Gris style?
I don't know. It's just I think it's a ripeness thing. I think because we are so cool climate that picking Pinot Gris at sort of earlier ripeness levels, you can end up with very hard, sort of unattractive, sort of lacking fruit quality, and we really need to sort of push the ripeness a little bit higher. So, with a wine like this, we're really sort of looking for, we almost have to wait for the flavour to come in, and it's coming in at sort of a richer sort of end of the flavour spectrum, which I guess in New Zealand we've always seen as a little bit more in common with areas like Alsace in France rather than northern Italy, and that sort of more austere, sort of acid-driven style, I suppose.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, and I think with modern New Zealand winemaking, we've been quite influenced by French cultivars and French varieties, and looked as France as the ultimate, whether rightly or wrongly. And so I guess that's probably come through the years into the winemaking a little bit. Italian varietals not so popular maybe in New Zealand in the past.
We really find with Pinot Gris it goes through a couple of sort of flavour spikes as well. There's quite an early one where there's a little bit of that sort of pear and spice comes through at an earlier sugar level, and then it sort of almost goes into a bit of a dip, sort of tastes terrible on the vine, you wouldn't want to pick it, and it sort of comes back later as a very rich sort of more of a unctuous sort of full-blown sort of white peach sort of style. So there's a bit of a art to trying to grab it at the right level. And generally with this vineyard, it's all handpicked. It's off our block, and Anna looks after these wines as well for us over there. Something to wonder what I do in this company. But anyway.
I love it.
So we try and get like a bit of a range of those styles. So you try and grab some a little bit early, some a little bit late, and hopefully they sort of piece together into something that's sort of greater than the single parts of it. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So did you say that you sometimes you'll pick some early and then some later, and you blend and see what happens?
Yeah.
Is that? Oh wow, that's awesome. Because you get this beautiful acidity, but then all this great floral, like this big creamy round, like it just kind of the same way you're talking about that for the grape. It does it in your mouth, like you get all this beautiful fruit, and then it kind of dips a little bit, and boom, like it just explodes into this beautiful, creamy, rich, flowery kind of thing that goes on. It's delicious. Yeah, that's my technical. That's my technical. Words. It's my technical words for it. It's like really fruit driven
as well. So if you let it get very ripe, it can taste very sort of flat and flabby and sort of soft.
No, but it's got all that gorgeous acidity. So obviously that acidity is coming from all those early picked grapes. Like it's just stunning. So are you guys doing do you feel that the vineyards really do show what you guys want? Like, do you feel like you're doing much to these grapes, or does that make sense? Like, do you feel like what you're showing, like what we're seeing here today, this is just a true expression of the vineyards that it's coming from, rather than you guys having to manipulate too much?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and particularly as you get to know the vineyards and the fruit that comes from it, you get to understand how to show it off best. So it is the fruit dictating how the wines are going to end up. Absolutely, yeah. And you've got to work with that, because if you try and work against it, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think the general philosophy in the winery is to not to manipulate things very much. We do very little sort of fining, and there's a world of sort of newfangled sort of products out there, which salesmen and saleswomen will turn up every day trying to sell us all these fancy new little bits and bobs. But to be honest, I don't know, maybe we're just lazy, or I think we just have really good vineyards. We just have good vineyards, and they give you good fruit, and then your job is really just not to screw it up, and just to look after it and get it into bottle, and to make decisions along the way. But I don't know, I'm a strong believer that every time you sort of interfere and play around and sort of fuss about with things, that you probably do more damage than good most of the time.
I love it.
Yeah, it's just really about nurturing it through more than manipulating.
It's definitely what a lazy would say.
All I know is that in Australia, you can pick up a bottle like this for like $17, and I think that is one of the best value for money wines. Honestly, it's just so delicious. Sit on the back porch, even mainly a summer country. Sit on the back porch, drink it. You can go with all different types of food. I love that wine. I actually just love the Kunal range as just for people to. I think people get so stuck in all the commercial, like the big commercial brands of New Zealand, and I think you guys have done such a great job on this range. So I do encourage everyone to try those things. But we couldn't be having a conversation about the Marlborough without doing a Sauvignon Blanc. So I believe you guys have one over there, and I have one over here. I'm a bit biased. I'm going for barrel age. So I'm going to be showing off the Mugwee. Hope I said that right. The Mugwee. And you guys are just going to show off the standard Awatare Valley Sav. For those, look, I think Sauv Blanc is very simple. Everyone knows New Zealand Sauv Blanc. We are looking for that, capsicum, like herbaceous, passion fruit. I always say like tomato vine, like the vine leaf tomato kind of thing. I'm not going to say all the pyrazine characters that come, but can you explain to the people at home what you're tasting first when you're going through your one, and we'll get you to hold that up, and then we'll go through the mugwee, and we'll get an understanding around the inspiration behind the mugwee. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, talk us through that, because I don't have that one with me right now. And this is the 2019, is that right?
That's right. Yeah. It's probably been one of our most successful Sauvignons, I suppose, in the show circuit and things like that, with reviewers, and I think that's really sort of a bit of a product of where it comes from and the sort of the age of our vineyards and our time in this winery and getting to know these vineyards and our picking decisions and a vintage as well. 2019 was a cracker of a vintage in Marlborough, and particularly in the Awatare Valley. It's a very sort of small crop, so low crop load, really good concentrated fruit, and just a lot of sort of power and concentration, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, taste it. Tell me what we're tasting. Share with the people. What are we expecting from this wine? Use your words.
I think that tomato leaf character that you hit on is like really typical of Awatare, and particularly the higher altitude vineyards in the Awatare. Like the Awatare Valley goes all the way from the ocean, from the Pacific Ocean, down at the where the river comes out, which is obviously at zero altitude, all the way up to where our vineyard is, which is 240 meters above sea level. So it's a range of different sort of terroirs. So our vineyard makes up the basis of this. I think it's like 60-70% of this. And then we pull in a couple of other blocks of growers which are very close to the winery here, which is sort of like 3/4 down the valley, so quite close to the ocean. So they would so our vineyard would tend to give you more of those sort of capsicum, the green capsicum, that sort of minerality, that tomato leaf character that you quite rightly have nailed. And I think around here, which is where we're sitting at the moment, is a bit closer to the ocean. It's a little bit riper, so you're tending to more towards some of those sort of passion fruit and white peach, and a little bit of lemongrass, and I think the really common thread is like a minerality that runs through them. So there's a real sort of like almost a salty sort of like a wet stone sort of character, which you see in the Awatare wines, not just in ours, but in the valley. It's very typical of the valley.
Yeah, and definitely in the good years like 19 was you're getting the concentration along with that minerality, which is it's really it makes.
You just touched on something that because I've always wondered why I really liked the Tohu Sauv Blanc, and you just hit on what that was. There's this level of minerality to it that just adds another level of complexity rather than this whole just passion fruit. Like, it's just a passion fruit, and like that's what I get from a lot of Marlborough Sauv Blanc. But that minerality and the acidity that comes from that, but also the finish that comes from that saline kind of character that comes through. That's what I really like about that wine. I could not pick. I'm like, why do I love this Sauv Blanc so much? Like, I do not like Sauv Blanc. It's very good. Okay, cool. So that's that one. So what is the difference with the mugwee? Is this a different vineyard? Is this obviously you've done it more in the Sancerre style because it's barrel aged, I'm assuming. Go for it. Tell me about this.
Couldn't be any more different.
It is single vineyard, the mugwee, just only from the Awatare, but it is barrel fermented, 100% barrel fermented, and aged on lees over the winter. We stew the barrels to get maximum lees contact, and it goes through that full secondary malolactic fermentation naturally in the spring. And then when we're blending it, we're really looking for reductive characters in the wine. So it has that struck match, definite overwhelming character when you first open the bottle. It does dissipate a little bit as it's in the glass, but it's fuller, creamier, not typical. It's atypical, definitely. Yeah.
It's got that the pickle, like I get like pickle juice. I know that sounds gross, but I love it. Like that dill pickle juice that comes through on the nose, which it's so attractive to me. But it reminds me of Sancerre. Like when I drink this, it's very Sancerre-ish. Is that just because of the barrel age, or is there something else to that?
I think it's the barrel aging and probably the level of solids in the wine as well. Like almost all Marlborough Sauvignon would be juice settled very clear, very clean, added yeast as well. So there's selected yeast which we're all using are now sort of tank fermented, so stainless steel fermented, very clean and cool fermented, whereas this wine is pressed straight to barrel. So we bring the fruit into the press and it's just straight into barrel with no settling, so the juice is completely cloudy, it's murky, it's like full of all sorts of solids and things and that. And then it's wild yeast as well, so we don't add any yeast to it, so it's just all the funky, weird, who knows what floating around in the atmosphere during vintage. And it's almost like all those sort of techniques which you use in sort of high-end Chardonnay production sort of thrown at Sauvignon Blanc production, but it's really the opposite. As I said, high solids, unknown yeasts, no temperature control, using barrels rather than stainless steel. It's like a whole sort of tapestry of different things which sort of come together to make, to be fair, it's very hit and miss as well. We would make, 50 barrels, 60 barrels like this, and maybe half of them sort of like just terrible and get thrown away, and the other half sort of amazing end up in here.
Is that right? So you can, like, this is such an experiment. Like the Mugwee range is such, I mean, it's not called Mugwee anymore, is it? Have you guys moved to a new name as well?
Yeah, well, it's sort of slipped into that new Whenua series as a 10th version, but actually I think we're going to be going back to that style going forward because we love it, and at the end of the day it's about us really, it's not about contenders.
That's it, it's all about what you guys want to make, what's interesting to you, right? I love this wine, and whenever I put this into a blind tasting with people, they can never pick what it is, which I absolutely love. And then when I say, oh, this is Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, they're like, what? Which is the kind of reaction that I want. I think when I first looked at Tohu, this is one of the first wines we actually tasted. So of course I went, that's Sauv Blanc from the Marlborough? What? Because you don't get all that passion fruit stuff. It's all these more developed characters, and it makes so much more sense now that I hear how you make it. So at least the barrels that aren't awesome, do you guys at least get to drink those as staffies or something? Or does it literally get thrown away?
We sell those ones to other customers, not to you guys.
Oh, good. Keeping the Aussies happy. I love it. All right, cool. Well, I love that wine. I think we've only got like 18 bottles left in Australia of that one, so hopefully we can get some more. I literally keep it for myself. But I told you I import this for myself. We are going to move on to one red because Pinot Noir from the same region, the Awatare Valley. One thing I'm finding a lot about your Pinots is that they need age. Like they look amazing after like 2 to 3 years. Can you explain, talk a little bit about Pinot Noir in the Awatare and how it grows, what you guys do to it, all the things.
All the things.
I think it's really low cropped, which is probably the really defining sort of feature of our vineyard. Like this is from the it says Awatare Valley on the label, but it's predominantly from our high altitude vineyard. There's a little bit grown around the winery here as well, but crop levels are insanely low. Like we can, if you compare them to, I'm not comparing the wine, but if you compare them to sort of Grand Cru Burgundy levels, like these cropping levels are like below that, which is not really by design. It's sort of just because it's a cold sort of windy, horrible place to grow grapes.
Sometimes nature will just do the crop thinning for us.
That's right.
It'll just come through and like knock all the shoots off. So
and frost at the end of each season, so we've been very frosty in spring and in autumn as well, which can sort of really curtail your growing season. So to get things ripe up there, we have to carry a really tiny little crop on there, so we get very sort of concentrated fruit, and very different to the rest of Marlborough as well. I think because of that sort of altitude and that remoteness, I often see a more similar character to our Central Otago wines coming through in this, like that sort of depth of colour and that sort of that darker fruit and that sort of wild thyme sort of herbal sort of thread that runs through them. I think that's a sort of really defining sort of character. So I know these are Marlborough Pinots, but I see them as quite different to the main valley in Marlborough, which can be very sort of red fruited, sort of raspberry and strawberry and a little bit sort of lighter, more primary fruit. Whereas I think ours get a little bit darker and it's I don't know if it's by our design because our winemaking is pretty standard, pretty sort of hands off, and we sort of let the fruit do the talking. We just get very concentrated, low crops and really good fruit power.
Is there any like whole bunch ferments or anything like that that happens with this, or any carbonic maceration or anything like that? Or just
A little bit,
Yeah, we play around with it. It depends on the season, definitely. Colder years probably hold off a bit, try a bit more. It's a lot of experimentation with that at the moment. Yeah.
It's been very fashionable, in the wine industry, that sort of a lot of whole bunch. But for us, I guess we sort of feel that there's quite a sort of a herbal sort of thread that runs through the Pinots anyway, and so to sort of accentuate that or to accent that by including a lot of stalks and stuff, that seems a little bit sort of contrary to what we should be doing. So and I guess that's another. Those techniques I feel are a little bit sort of winemakery manipulation of fruit as well. So I feel like you lose maybe a bit of your expression of your terroir by doing that. So it's almost a little bit more purist to me to just sort of stem it. And there's a lot of whole berries go in it. It's still all hand picked and still all in, good French oak, but we probably use less and less new oak all the time, and we sort of wind back the some of the trickery every year, basically. I think as the vines get older too, they sort of more speak for themselves, and you have to get a bit less involved as a winemaker. I think as as we go through your careers as well, you tend to not sort of play around quite as much.
I love it. But one thing I get off this, and you mentioned Central Otago before, and I've always struggled with Central Otago Pinots because I find them very damp on the palate. I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe that's that herbal note that comes from this. It's a dampness, whereas I find this much cleaner on the palate, but also find it very peppery, like lots of pepper. And on the nose initially was like musk, like that beautiful like musk stick kind of thing that came through on the nose. I don't know if you guys are getting that over there, but I just find how clean this wine is compared to stuff that comes out of the Central Otago. So I don't know if that's a common thread throughout the Marlborough, but I just think it's delicious, to be honest.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because basically our sort of winemaking with this is it's they ferment it quite warm, so it's very sort of long cold soak and nice a nice hot ferment, and then press. There's no press cut, so like press completely to barrel, so the barrels are full solids. There's no settling of the finished wine or anything like that. It's a very sort of traditional Burgundy techniques, I suppose. And then spring malos as well. It goes through malo in spring. There's no sulphur until sort of February. So it's very sort of hands-off winemaking. It's almost like the less we do to the Pinot, the better they get, I feel. Yeah. I think that's just coming from the vineyard again. Yeah.
I love it. I love all that beautiful cherry or that lovely like red fruit that comes through. I love the pepperiness. I love that herbaceous character that's coming through. The finish is lovely, excellent food wine. Again, this kind of thing, and it sits at that same price what people expect for Pinot, like around that $40 on the shelf, $45 on a shelf for a really quality Pinot. So I think it's fantastic. I want to see more. Like we've had the Rory in the past, and I think the Rory's changing. I think I've got it all landing as well, which probably brings me on to, while I continue to finish this wine with you guys, the Whenua Matua range. It's something that we're waiting on. So we've got the Whenua Awa, which is the Wreath Sling that's coming. What's this Whenua Matua range? What does that mean? What are we going to expect from it?
Yeah, so Whenua Matua is a single vineyard Nelson wine. So Nelson is about a region about an hour and a half away from Marlborough. It's completely different soils, completely different climate. It's a lot more humid over there, probably warmer, less day-nighttime temperature differences. So definitely different styles of wine coming out of Nelson. So it's really fun for us as winemakers to actually have those two quite distinct parcels, Marlborough and Nelson, and to treat them exactly the same, and then to end up with really cool, definitely different wines. Yeah,
I love it.
The name Angelica comes out of those are the two names of our vineyard. So this one behind me here is Whenua Awa, which is we're our predominant Marlborough vineyard, and then Whenua Matua is the name of our, which actually means homeland. So Whenua means land or earth in Māori, and Matua is sort of a name for home or your base, I suppose. So it's So the vineyard, and Anna looks after all our wines. Oh, again, I'm not sure what I do in this.
I don't know. Anna just does everything. I'm not sure.
Just in charge of something, I'm not sure anymore. So she looks after our wines from over in Nelson there, and then that land is very important to us as important to our owners because it's sort of ancestral land for our Maori owners. So they've been on it for sort of hundreds of years, and it's been through numerous sort of ownership changes through the government and all that sort of thing. And it's something where our owners took control back under in the sort of late 1990s when it was all covered in sort of scrub and bush and things like that. Well, not bush, but sort of scrub and weeds basically. And then they've cleared it out and planted Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, Albariño, a little bit of Wreath Sling, and Chardonnay on it. So as we've sort of, it's a real sort of celebration of the history of that land, I suppose. So really important to our owners to be sort of making these sort of high-end sort of single vineyard wines from land which is, has a lot of sort of history and importance to them. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. It's a nice little story for us too.
Yeah.
And it makes, for us, it makes really good wine, which is sort of the bottom line, I guess, from a winemaking perspective.
Well, I can't wait to come and visit. Like, I want to come and see this for myself, like all these beautiful regions all the way through. So on that, I guess you kind of just touched on it. You mentioned Albariño. What's next? Like, what are you guys working on? What's what's fun?
It's really interesting. We've got a Pinot Blanc knocking around from this vineyard up here, which we make in a sort of a Chardonnay style, which is pretty
Pinot
interesting.
Blanc? Okay. I feel like Pinot Blanc's going to become a resurgence. I feel like I've heard a few winemakers mentioning Pinot Blanc as a new, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens. Yeah. And I guess I am talking to two winemakers, if there is an aspiring winemaker out there, watching right now, what's something you would leave with them? Like what would their first steps be, you think?
What would you do? Travel lots, I think.
Taste as much as you can, whenever you can, I think. Yeah.
I don't think you need to encourage people to drink more.
Taste responsibly, of course.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of just building up that experience and not being in too much of a hurry, I think, as well. It's like you really have to get out there around the world and see how everyone does it and sort of find your little niche in that, and like us, find a good company to work for as well, because there's a world out there of big corporate sort of horrible people to work for, and if you're lucky enough to find a good one that sort of cares about wine, cares about the land and the future, and and that local thing as well, I think it's really important. It's really important to us that we're New Zealand owned and that will never
Family
change.
owned. Yeah. I was actually, I got to tell you guys a story. I was in Bali for a wedding recently, literally a year ago, big Maori wedding. And I was having a chat around Tohu with someone that was sitting at my table. And she's like, I think I'm part of that bloodline. Like, she actually how they have the shareholding. She's actually part of that, which was really cool to go, oh my gosh, like, this is real. It's part of the bloodline. She's automatically got shares in the company. She can get these grants through the company. I think it's such an awesome company. Like, I just love the company. I think it's great. Yeah. Can people go and visit you? If people want to come over to the Awatare, is there a place that they can come and say hello?
We don't actually. The winery's not actually open to the public, like as in a cellar door or something, but we have actually, as part of the beer brand that that is now sort of being added to the suite of products which comes under Kono, there's going to be a sort of a cellar door and a place where you can actually go and taste the wines and have a chat about them as well. It's actually on the way to Abel Tasman National Park, which lots of Aussies will know as a very popular tourist destination. Once we get tourists back in, of course, whenever that might be in a few months' time. So
awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
You can still send people to talk to us. It's pretty quiet out here. We quite like having visitors.
Yeah.
It's nice if someone else turns up. Just bring sausage rolls and
meat pies, Tim Tams, all the things. And Anna, a question for you, I guess. Is there like a big community of female winemakers around the Marlborough? Like, do you find it's
Yeah, absolutely. There is a woman wine initiative in New Zealand, and there's regional branches of that, I suppose. So, and there's definitely like a supportive thing. It's been traditionally a male-dominated area, but I think more and more, women are, getting into the industry, and it's great to see. So
I love it. Well, we look at here in Australia, some of our best winemakers are all women, so maybe there's something in it. Maybe it comes back to the intuition piece. Women probably have good intuition around the winemaking. That's what I'm going to put out there. But guys, I really want to thank you for taking the time today. It means so much to me that you would take time out of your life to come and chat on our little show. Thank you for these incredible wines, and I look forward to seeing what comes next.
No worries.
Yeah.
Anytime. Our pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
See you later. Bye-bye.
And to everyone at home, I want to thank you again for joining us for In the Bottle today. I do hope you enjoyed that little interview series over the last few weeks. You know, we'll be taking a short break for a couple of weeks while we await the arrival of some incredible new wines to share with you. Any of the wines that you saw today, they are available to purchase through direct wine sellers. You can buy them at Chambers Cellars. There is a whole range of different places. A lot of independent bottle shops will stock all of the Kono and Tohu range. So I do highly recommend you try these. Give yourself a chance to try what else the Marlborough can do. And guys, I look forward to seeing you next time when we go in the bottle with me, Angelica Nora. See you soon.